I'm Chris Farrell, and this is On Watch. Happy Thursday to everybody. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. Today we have three topics to cover: El Paso, Benghazi, and Phoenix. So we'll start with El Paso. Those of you out there who've been following our work for the last few years, in particular about the last 6 years with respect to our work in El Paso, will know that there's a long twisted tale of federal law enforcement corruption, state level corruption, even at the county level, and that of course El Paso is sort of the never-ending gateway for drugs and human trafficking into the United States with little or no enforcement. And it really is a nest of corruption. We've pointed out things, made reports based on excellent sources that we have on both sides of the border. And we've listened to people like former FBI Director Comey say nonsense in response to our reporting. And then about a month later, we got State Department records detailing and confirming everything we had reported in the months before. In particular, this had to do with Islamist cells operating in the operating in the El Paso and Juarez area, and they're specializing in crossing Muslim or Islamic operatives into the United States. It was so bad that the regional security officer in Juarez was running around buying full-page or display-page ads in newspapers trying to track down a guy named Adnan el-Shukr Juma, who was the head of al-Qaeda operations in North America until he was killed just a couple of years ago. Shukr Juma is important because those of you who have seen the Sun City cell, and I encourage you to go to our YouTube page and watch the Sun City cell. It's a 48-minute documentary that talks about a 2009 bomb plot in Chicago that was organized, manned, equipped, and directed from El Paso. It's a great story. It really gives you a sense of the forces at work. And frankly, it's disturbing because it shows how the FBI facilitated the release of a guy named Imad Karakra from a Chicago or Cook County jail in Chicago. So there's lots of twists and turns. There's lots of stories in El Paso. One of the things I want to tell you about is, we have tremendous sources in government, out of government, civilians, both sides of the border, and that's how we're able to get the information that we have. And those sources have reported reliably and consistently with very high quality information for years. What's disturbing though is that in one slice of the pie, in one portion of the overall El Paso story, a very excellent source who provided information to the Senate Judiciary Committee, who cooperated with the Justice Department Inspector General, who has bent over backwards to assist law enforcement, whether it's the DEA, Homeland Security, Department of Justice, a whole alphabet soup of folks. This person is currently actively being persecuted, really gone after by some corrupt law enforcement agents. And there are unlawful efforts to intimidate this guy. I'm saying this just not only so that you as the Judicial Watch supporters are aware of the lengths people will go to try to tell the truth and unveil corruption or expose it, but also how reactive and how vindictive the government is when they feel exposed or at risk. They'll do virtually anything to shoot the messenger or to in some way turn an honest person who's telling inconvenient facts into some sort of a bad guy. It's atrocious. It's really an abuse of the law. And we see folks using technical means to collect information on someone without a warrant. I just want you to go back and look at our El Paso reporting, our Juarez reporting. Look at the Sun City cell. Know that there's some very brave people in the El Paso, Juarez area, both sides of the border, civilians, law enforcement, others, who over years have helped us and have helped this country by providing reliable intelligence information. And now somehow, the wheels of justice end up chewing up or grinding up the very people that have been trying to help them and support them. It's sad, it's ironic. Judicial Watch will continue to support and defend them. There's no doubt about that. We have in the past, we will continue to. We will unveil and reveal unpleasant, unflattering things about various government agents who are involved in corrupt activities. But you, the Judicial Watch viewing audience, our supporters, you need to know the lengths that people have gone to get the truth out. And likewise, it's good for you to understand and appreciate the lengths that we've gone to support and defend people who are honorable, law-abiding folks who just happen to have information that is embarrassing to the Department of Justice and other federal law enforcement agencies, that's very awkward and difficult to explain. And it's a case where they try to literally, not literally, but almost literally, shoot the messenger or put the messenger in an impossible position. And so, I also hope that some viewers at the Department of Justice and the FBI are watching this as well, because I want to send a clear message that Judicial Watch, we actively pursue and go after folks involved in corrupt activities, and we're not going to stop, we're not going to forget, we're not going to go away. And so while you may have pushed things off to the back burner, we haven't. And I'll close with just one gentle prod to the folks that are doing things unlawfully today as we speak. Pay close attention. Motorola 49. All right, that's all you have to know. Motorola 49. Take that with you and consider the things that you're engaged in. Okay, next topic, Benghazi. Those of you who've been following along in the last couple of days know that we recently had a federal court judge here in Washington, D.C. order the State Department to go back and search the state.gov email domain for the emails of, it's the trifecta, Huma Abedin, Cheryl Mills, and Jake Sullivan. Believe it or not, and this is it's so bizarre, it's tough to believe, the State Department was arguing that with respect to Benghazi and all the communications in the Secretary of State's office, that they did not have to go search for Mrs. Clinton's 3 closest aides and their emails in the State Department system. Now, we already know that there was this outlaw server that Mrs. Clinton was running and the 22 top secret SCI documents that went across that. That's bad enough. But the State Department, with a straight face, tried to tell a federal judge that in searching for emails in the State Department, they didn't have to go look for Huma Abedin, Cheryl Mills, and Jake Sullivan. It is mind-boggling that they had the guts, frankly, to show up in a federal court and take that position and make that argument to a judge. But they did. But hey, there's good news. We won. And the judge ordered the State Department to go back and conduct that search and produce those emails to us. So that's an important court victory for us. It will provide more accountability to you. I think it'll be interesting to see all the shenanigans and coordination going on as the Benghazi attack unfolded. And let me close with one last thought here. Benghazi's not going away, right? So just like I mentioned before, El Paso's not going away as far as we're concerned. Benghazi's not going away. We're not going to stop. We're not going to quit. We're not going to give up. We're not going to forget. We will continue to pursue Benghazi and all the various investigative leads until the very, very end. We're going to get every bit of information we can and make it public. Okay, so El Paso and Benghazi, and last is Phoenix. So with respect to Phoenix, those of you who've been watching the news in the last couple of days have heard that the FBI is reopening its investigation of the coincidental, not coincidental, meeting between former President Clinton and then Attorney General Loretta Lynch on the tarmac at Sky Harbor Airport in Phoenix. and their 20-minute plus meeting on the ground. This is a case where it's bad just at the perception, at the visual of those two talking, right? These are two very smart, very educated attorneys with lots of experience who know not just how the game is played, but also what their legal, ethical requirements are. And even the perception of impropriety is a non-starter for the Attorney General, and one would like to believe for a former president as well. But certainly the burden is on the Attorney General not to meet with the spouse of someone who's the subject of a counterespionage investigation for their criminal activity. But they did, right? They met, and we know they did, and the press frantically tried to ignore it, but thankfully a local ABC reporter in Phoenix picked up on the story and really broke some tremendous news with that. We've done tons of documentary or FOIA work to uncover documents or records about that meeting. We filed lawsuits. Here's what's really interesting. We recently got sets of email showing the public affairs folks and senior sort of, deputy assistant whatevers, high-ranking assistants at both the Department of Justice and the FBI collaborating on talking points. And so they're trying to make it a non-event. So the language that they're trading back and forth is coincidental meeting by former President Clinton and AG Lynch, just trying to minimize it, trying to trivialize it and minimize what the meeting was. And it's very clear that both parties, both the FBI and the DOJ parties and the public affairs folks involved in this, they know it's a, quote, red flag. That's their language. They know, uh-oh, something's wrong. How are we going to kind of schmooze this over? And so now we have the documentary evidence from their emails showing them frantically trying to come up with language to talk it away and explain it. More disturbingly, there's still a ton of redactions, meaning blackouts, where information is not revealed. They're making the claim that it's what they call B5 material, which means deliberative process or pre-decisional material. This is another flagrant, blatant lie that we'll challenge. If you're coming up with a press statement, how is that deliberative process? And besides that, it's history, right? It's more than a year ago, or just about a year ago. So what's the big mystery, right? They should release all that information. And I guess sort of the cherry on top of all of this is that this is the Department of Justice and FBI that is headed up by Attorney General Sessions now. So why are they so furiously trying to cover up and withhold information? I don't get it. Why does the Trump administration defend or in any way, run interference for the likes of Loretta Lynch and Comey and their sort of inner circles and former President Clinton and then let alone Hillary Clinton? What are they thinking? Who's in charge? I know that it's been tough to get people appointed by the Senate and confirmed and put into position, but at some point there has to be adult leadership that goes down and communicates very clearly that the objective of the Trump administration is to provide transparency and release all this information. You have to ask yourself, who benefits, right? Why in the world would they continue the same worn-out legal arguments of the Obama administration? It doesn't make sense. And so, my third sort of, hey, pay attention here, whether it's the corrupt people in El Paso and up at the Department of Justice, or whether it's people tied into Benghazi and its State Department, now, again, another Justice Department issue. Hey, the American public is owed this information. Who are you protecting and why? Ask yourself that. This is a compelling public information issue that the public is owed the information on, and withholding this information doesn't benefit anybody but the usual sort of inside gang, swamp creature, corrupt people that are either careerists trying to protect their job or outright crooks, right? So it's time to release all this information. All these sort of Obama-era FOIA records the floodgates should be opened. They should release them all. And I'll remind you, just like Obama did under President George W. Bush when he came into office, Obama released, without hesitation, all these so-called torture memos of Bush. So, you know, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And you can't have an idea or a mentality that somehow, if the public finds out the truth, that's bad or scary. That isn't how this country was established. The public is owed the information. Government employees are trusted servants, right? They're not some sort of nobility or some other higher class that dictates what we know and don't know. Just the opposite. They're trusted servants who should be producing their work product to us so that we make informed decisions about government. So, halfway around the world, right? Benghazi, El Paso, and Phoenix. 3 important subjects. I encourage you to go back on our website and drill down, watch the Sun City cell, look at the insanity of some of the behavior of government agents in El Paso, the corruption, the cartel money, but then also take a hard look at the rationale being thrown up to withhold Benghazi stuff, and then this latest crazy effort to hide the Clinton-Lynch Tarmac meeting. It's just nuts. And I encourage you all to communicate with your representatives and senators. And if you agree with me, if you think my points are valid, I encourage you to go ahead and communicate that in a strong but polite way, right? We don't need people kind of raving and making all kinds of reckless language. You just need to communicate in a polite, firm, direct way so no one's confused over what you feel. But let me tell you, you get a lot further in life being civil and courteous than you do with reckless language. And so with that, I'm going to turn to our producer, Matt, who's probably got some questions for me.
Yeah, and we have a lot. Starting on Sessions, Rusty wants to know, why is James Comey getting away with his crimes? And where's Jeff Sessions and all of that? Yeah,
Mr. Sessions is very quiet. And I think that's actually sort of a reflection on his personality. He truly is a gentleman. And so, you know, somebody in his position with his sort of political and legal philosophy is not a grandstander. And so what I would like to believe, I don't know if it's true or not, but what I'd like to believe is that very quietly but very dutifully, Attorney General Sessions and his staff are actively investigating and pursuing Mr. Comey and his behavior and conduct, and that a grand jury's been impaneled, because of course grand juries operate in secret, or they're supposed to. So there may be action and activity that we don't know about yet. That's what I want to believe, and that's where I have to leave it for now.
We have a question from Douglas about the IRS. Why is Obama's director of the IRS still employed in the government?
Yeah, great question. Mr. Koskinen, right? Perhaps one of the most smug, condescending public figures in recent memory. I don't have an answer for you. I just don't know. I would have thought that he would have been, you know, one of the first ones out the door. There's no good explanation or excuse. You know, maybe a reporter needs to shout that at the president or Mr. Mnuchin or, you know, Koskinen's boss and say, hey, if this guy's as bad as everyone says he is, why is he still hanging around? It just doesn't make sense to me.
Does Sessions have the staff to go after all of these issues and tackle them?
Sessions does have the staff. I mean, there's an internal problem, obviously, because there's these sort of embedded leftists that occupy various positions within the Justice Department. There's also the careerists, right? The people that have this philosophy of, you know, big case, big problems, little case, little problems, no case, no problems, right? There are people within the FBI and Department of Justice who have that mentality. I guarantee it. In fact, I know some of them, unfortunately. And so they are looking for any way possible to knock down an investigation or to discredit a source or to dead end something because they don't want to find it, right? They sort of a willful blindness. But that is not everybody, right? There are good, solid people who are willing to follow the evidence and enforce the law. And that's who we rely on. That's who we rely on as a society, but frankly, that's what Judicial Watch relies on, that there's honest brokers in there, right? That somewhere there's somebody whose gag reflex is going to be engaged, and they're going to say, no, enough, and they're going to do the right thing no matter what. That's what we're hoping for. And so Attorney General Sessions does have sufficient staff, enough people with enough guts and enough honor to do the right thing, even if they don't necessarily personally, politically agree with everything. They understand their duty and obligation, that they raised their right hand and took an oath. Not an oath to the president, not an oath to the country, not an oath to the Attorney General. They took an oath to the Constitution, right? We don't take, our public servants, our commissioned officers and officers of the court, they don't swear an oath to some vague idea or some changeable thing. They swear their oath to the Constitution, which is meant as a permanent document, our guiding supreme law. And so there's folks who believe that and want to do it. And even if we have differences, that's okay, because they're serious about the law. And so I have confidence that Mr. Sessions can carry out his investigations. Yes.
Shifting gears on Benghazi, what is the time frame for getting those documents on Benghazi?
Yeah.
And is it possible that, as you say, some deep state operatives could tamper with these records to remove anything egregious?
Yeah, there's always the possibility that people are going to abuse the various exemptions or pull a Sandy Burger and stuff documents in their underwear and socks. Unfortunately, that's just a fact of life. So if there's a bad actor, if there's someone there embedded who wants to do damage, well, guess what? They'll probably do damage. But again, back to kind of my point about people doing the right thing, even if they don't necessarily agree with the politics of it. It'll be months before we see these records. That's just the way the system works. They operate at almost a glacial pace. They'll say, hey, we can produce 500 documents a month. I can tell you that the guys sitting behind the camera right here, they process and post 500 documents in an afternoon, right? That is not a big deal. But they have these ridiculous work schedules and these production calendars that really don't reflect what somebody kind of driving hard to the hoop would actually do and get accomplished. But that's the system as it exists, and that's what we have to work with.
Chris has a question. Are we looking into how the Tarmac meeting was set up?
Yeah, I can give you sort of a partial answer. I know that, and I'm working off memory now, right? I don't have any notes or anything in front of me. But my memory is that Mr. Clinton was due to leave Phoenix, and then he discovered, by some means, I don't know how, that A.G. Lynch was inbound. And so he delayed his departure in order to meet her. Now, how is that all orchestrated? Who called who or who texted who? I don't know. But I do know that there was initially a plan for him to leave. He delayed his departure, and that then Lynch shows up, and then they have their meeting. And that's my best recollection standing here at this moment.
So if they had talked about, we have a question from Melissa, if they had talked about grandkids, why were some of these records redacted?
Yeah, my friend Michael Bekesha, one of the attorneys here, says, babies and golf, right? Babies and golf, what's the big deal? What's so secret? If you're just talking about babies and golf, what in the world are you hiding, other than perhaps people's addresses and phone numbers and what specific golf course you're going to be playing at, right? I mean, other than that, what in the world would a babies and golf conversation, how could that be in any way sensitive or, it's just nonsense. It's baloney. And, we'll keep pushing, we'll keep digging like we always do. We'll get to the bottom of it.
I think we have time for perhaps one more question.
Sure, one more.
Kat wants to know, when will the lowest learner be scrutinized and prosecuted?
Yeah, there's another one, right? So The Department of Justice and the FBI did not pursue Lois Lerner. They drew this conclusion that this whole thing with the IRS, no criminal acts occurred. And that's preposterous. I mean, Lois Lerner turned over 1.25 million taxpayer files to the FBI to have them screen them, to look through them, to see if there was anything in there that they would be interested in going after. She had a meeting with Justice Department officials to decide, hey, let's pick some people to criminally prosecute because we want to send a message. Well, if that is an abuse in the technical sense of what records can go where and who has access to taxpayer money, then this other separate meeting about basically finding people to criminally prosecute, this is something out of a bad movie about Stalin, right? We don't operate that way in this country, or we shouldn't. And so, it's my hope that this whole IRS thing gets a relook, just like Hillary Clinton's emails, just like the Tarmac meeting in Phoenix. There are unresolved issues that were buried and kind of swept under the rug, or whatever you want to call it, in the Obama era that really need to be addressed. And as a country, we can't afford to just let this stuff slide. It's corrosive, right? It tears at the fabric of the country when there's so much wrongdoing and everyone just kind of whistles past the graveyard and pretends, oh, well, no big deal. It is a big deal, and it really deserves to be investigated. So thank you for joining us for another edition of On Watch. I'm Chris Farrell. It's always a pleasure to give you an update on what we're doing, and hopefully you'll come back and join us next Thursday at this time as well. Thanks very much.